Hey guys, welcome in to the back to school edition of the Pick Six podcast. Kids are going back to school, they're learning. We're at fall camp, we're learning. The leaves are changing, it's a whole new season. We're very excited to be jumping in, talking some Husker football today. It's Sam, it's Jimmy, I'm Evan, and again, this is the Pick Six podcast. What is going on with you guys today?
My kids went to school. So on Monday and Tuesday, my children went to school, and they were pretty excited to be going back.
Were you as excited about them going back?
I think so. I think I was. Yep. I was excited for them. I was very excited. Hello, everyone.
I was thrown for a loop. I have to talk to a Husker basketball recruit later today, and I was trying to set something up for early in the day in the morning or something. So I got to school. I was like, already? I was not prepared.
He's
for that.
talking to Isaac Trout.
Yes,
the
Isaac
Husker
Trout.
basketball prospect.
That's true.
Yeah.
I should name that. But yeah, I was thrown off. Is it not a bit early to be going back to school or no?
No.
Really?
No.
This is about right.
Okay.
This is about the right time. Jimmy's here is from the East Coast. He's not from the East Coast, but he's from the East because just about everything east of Chicago is east.
Okay.
And what do you guys go back on Labor Day or something?
When I went to school in California, we went back around Labor Day. I'm thinking last week of August was when I went to school when I lived in Ohio.
Well, welcome to the plains, my friend.
Okay. That's all
Welcome
right.
to the plains.
It'll be an adjustment.
Where the schools open and they move to the rhythm of the planting season. It doesn't.
So when I was in school, we had half days the first week because it was too hot, and not everybody had air conditioning, and so we had the big metal fans that just, and you couldn't hear anything or see anything. I don't know if that's still a thing, or if everybody just has air conditioning now. Like, is that, to your knowledge, are half days?
I'm sure there are a number of schools in America where unfortunately they don't have access to chilled air, central air, so they either open windows or, of course in Alaska it wouldn't be as much of a problem up there, but no, I don't know. That's a good question. I think that the reason that schools used to start later is because of the heat, and
Sure.
I wouldn't be opposed to a school starting the day after Labor Day and ending the weekend before Memorial Day. That wouldn't bother me at all. Let's go back to that calendar, give our kids as many months as possible of summer, but I'm glad they're going back because they're ready. Our kids' internal clocks have changed to the point where they know when mid-August comes, they're ready to roll.
Yeah, no doubt.
Nebraska football's ready to roll.
Nebraska football is
They
absolutely
started
ready
prep
to roll.
this week for Illinois.
Yes, they have so
we had
much.
about 19 questions about that.
Yeah,
last-
about exactly when it was.
When are you guys going to start Illinois prep? I'm driving to Illinois and going to watch a game.
So, and this is a good segue into something that we would like to do fairly regularly, and that's this. We'd like to discuss and digest a big red idea every week. So something that comes out of camp or an interview that we heard, something that someone says that, is just worth kind of pondering a little bit more. And this week, you wrote about it, Jim. You kind of lay out what we're going to talk about here.
So, shout out to Ben Stilley for the free content. Ben Stilley was talking about Ty Robinson, and saying he delivered the quote that just because you're a year older doesn't mean you're a year better, and he was referring to his own development at Nebraska and how he did not maybe heed the advice of some coaches early on, and he sees Ty Robinson making progress in the mental aspect of Nebraska's defense. Eric Janander touched on that earlier in the day. And Ben Stilley said, just because you're a year older doesn't mean you're a year better. And I think that jumped out to me as something that could apply to the Huskers as a whole, particularly during this COVID year. They have all this experience back, but so does everyone else. And all this experience hasn't amounted to much so far. It was a decent, all these 5th and 6th year guys were 4th and 5th year guys before. They weren't winning games then. Why is it different now? They returned 70. I saw this when I was rewatching Frost's press conference at Big Ten Media Day. Nebraska returned 74% of its production from last season. Big number, right? That's 11th in the Big Ten. So that kind of just puts it into perspective. Experience is not the same advantage this year that it used to be. What do you guys think? Do you think it's different this year? Do you think that experience matters?
Yes, it's different. I think one of the reasons it's different is because the 2017 and 2018 recruiting classes fell apart. And so What you're talking about with Nebraska is a very small group of 2016 guys. Dismuke, Williams, even though he wasn't in that class, he was of that age.
Right.
Stilley, Dome, and a few others. And then you're kind of, outside of Martinez and maybe Juergens, you're jumping all the way over to 2019. And so there's this gap. The 2017 and the 2018 classes only produced like 3 or 4 starters combined. And that they've lost, I think, 65, 70% of those players. And so part of the reason that I think it's more valuable is the guys that are getting a year older are by and large young guys. And so because those guys were already young, a year of seasoning in the defense or in the offense is going to be helpful. There's absolutely a corollary to, well, you know, Kansas brought back every one of its starters. Well, who gives a crap? Kansas sucked. So great, you brought back all these guys, but they didn't win a game last year. Why would they win a game this year? That kind of thing. But I think Nebraska, I think that the case that they would make is, and I wrote about this for the 2020 class. The 2019 class didn't play a hell of a lot in 2019. Evan and I had 34 arguments about that in the car. That I insisted that those guys should have played. Evan didn't agree. Then they didn't play that much last year. And then the 2020 class was basically a lost class. They didn't have a freshman year. And so this is kind of their first year for a lot of them. And so I do think that the extra year is going to be beneficial. Not always, Jimmy, but I think in this particular case it is.
I remember talking to Mo Berry a couple of years ago about this idea that, like, can it be harmful for a freshman or a young player to be thrown into a game situation sooner than they would like to be? And he said, yeah. I mean, he was someone who was there during the coaching transition from Riley to Frost, and he said there were guys who played that did not have the success that they were looking for, and in fact, it was so far the other way that he felt like that carried into multiple years ahead in their careers.
Yes.
They were never the same player after that. And so Nebraska had been...
That's quite a claim, but yep, fair enough.
I mean,
he was there, we weren't.
And how, you know, it seems like that had been a pattern for a long time is, okay, these freshmen come in and you count on them right away, and more often than not for Nebraska, it didn't pan out, and then you just turned your attention to the next recruiting class, and then those guys became kind of the hopefuls from the fan base about becoming something. And so, I think in a weird way, the COVID year was a blessing because it allowed Nebraska to do that thing that Scott Frost always has said he wants to do, and that's to get old and stay old. And I think that's especially illustrative on the defensive side when you think, man, in a normal eligibility clock progression, Nebraska would have 2 new starting safeties this year. Cam Taylor-Britt may have gone to the NFL. Ben Stilley wouldn't be there. Like, it would have looked different. Guys would have been pushed into duty sooner, and now this allows them to continue to develop, learn from older guys, work behind the scenes. So it seems like there is some value, in that.
So you think Dismuke and Williams' decisions affected Taylor-Britt's decision to return? Because his decision wasn't related to eligibility; it was related to the NFL.
Right.
But it's possible that you're right.
I mean, all those guys defensively came back.
He would have been exposed. I think more. I think he's going to be a really good player. But if you had 2 new starting safeties,
right,
that might be kind of tough.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it matters that in terms of how it affected Taylor-Britt's decision, I think it matters that those guys came back because that probably made him believe that they could be a better team. He's coming back to something worth coming back to.
Yeah, a team that can make a bowl game.
Exactly. So I think in that regard, that's where those 2 threads are connected. To the point about where throwing into the fire can be harmful, I tend to lean more exposure therapy is the way. You have to learn by doing. Mm-hmm. But I think where the experience, as it relates to that, matters is you have people to learn from. You have people who you can watch their mannerisms. You can watch JoJo Doman and the safeties, how they practice, how they work, how they study, and you can learn from that. Whereas in a normal cycle, you'd be watching guys who are first-time starters. Maybe they know how the program works, but carrying themselves within that context of the team would be a little bit different. So I think in some ways it matters. In other ways, such as this is a team that's had a losing record since all these guys have been here, you're gonna have to. It's harder for me to see it that way, but I definitely think it matters within the context of the locker room and building good leadership habits.
Well, generally, though, Jimmy, the growth of a player happens the most from year 1 to year 3. And so in theory, they should be getting more growth from some of these guys. And the example that was brought up, you used Ben Stilley's example of Ty Robinson, I'll use Chinander. The thing that Chinander was able to see on tape is that Ty Robinson made mistakes that we couldn't necessarily pick up because the mistakes were related to not doing his job. And sometimes when you're in a 3-4 defense and you're a defensive end, doing your job means getting zero glory. You don't get anything because that's the nature of that role. It's not a 4-3 shoot the gaps kind of defense. And so I think probably a guy like Robinson has really benefited from hearing, hey, and we noticed this. He'd make one splash play a game at TFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wouldn't see him a lot the rest of the game. And then by the end of the game, it was Casey Rogers who was playing, because Casey would do what he was asked. He played through the man, and he'd go to the quarterback that way. And I'm guessing that Robinson has learned a tremendous amount about what it means to play the position as designed by the coach versus as designed to get stats. And there is a difference.
I think the larger issue or challenge this year too is interesting because you see so many returners, so much returning production, as you mentioned, Jimmy, that like I think it could be tempting for teams like Nebraska to feel some complacency, to say like, hey, we're in a pretty good spot here. We have all these guys coming back. Some of us are in our 6th years. We know what the heck we're doing with the schemes, and that's going to just translate to wins. And so I think that's another kind of interesting aspect of that, is to say, yeah, just because you're still here doesn't mean you're better, doesn't mean that we've arrived. You have to still continue to go out and earn that. And then that can be hard, right? I mean, you're talking Deontay Williams, I think, is 25. Or if he's not, he's going to be this season.
Right.
That's pretty old for a college football player.
It is.
To continue to have that drive and move on. I mean, I think your average age of an NFL draft pick is like 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska, the BYU of the Midwest.
Yeah. Whoa, and you put Damian Jackson in there.
There you
He's
go.
29,
There
30
you
years
go.
old.
Different kind of mission with Damian Jackson.
Yeah,
Different
BYU
kind of
does a
mission.
good job of certainly placing guys on the roster who are grown men. I think they probably have the highest married quotient in the country. So it's a whole different kind of deal when you play them. And as Nebraska discovered, and sometimes you're surprised by their physicality and that kind of thing. So yeah, interesting topic.
So, somewhat related to this, out of the Illinois camp this week, Britt Bielema has come out and said, hey, we're an unknown quantity here. And that's a pretty rare thing in college football, when everybody's sharing tape, when plays get copied within a week, when information's flying around the way that it is. Illinois is in an interesting spot, as they like to say, because they have more super seniors returning than anyone else in the country. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anyone's
It's probably pretty close.
quantified that, but it's a lot.
Probably pretty
What
close.
is it, a dozen, something like that?
20s, 22.
In the 20s? Okay. So you have that on the one hand. You have the accomplished Big Ten coach from his time at Wisconsin with a brand new program of experienced players who were on, by the way, a 2-6 Illinois team last year. On the other hand, you have a pretty experienced Nebraska team, at least defensively, with more coaching continuity than it's had in a decade, going back to the Bo era. Bielema would indicate that he feels like Illinois has the advantage as kind of that unknown quantity coming in. Nebraska, I think, has a quiet confidence that feels like it's in the driver's seat in that regard with what it's bringing back. How do you guys break that down? Who do you think has the advantage on paper from that perspective?
I would quibble with the idea that Illinois is this big, giant question mark. I know it behooves Brett Bielema to project confidence, to throw Illinois' name around like that, but I mean, this guy coached in the Big Ten for quite some time. We saw him at Arkansas. He didn't change much of what he was trying to do from Wisconsin to Arkansas. I think we kind of know that he's going to want to run the ball and take care of it with the quarterback and play good defense. I don't think it's this huge question mark. So from that perspective, I disagree. And also, as Evan mentioned, yeah, they got all these guys back, but they won 2 games last year. Granted, one of them was against Nebraska. I I applaud Brett Bielema. Coaches oftentimes have to be salespeople. I think that's the angle he's working here. I disagree with his premise. I think we understand what Illinois is, both schematically and personnel-wise. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, you definitely know what their personnel is. I would say that the advantage goes to each respective offense, and here I'll unpack it. Illinois' offense is probably going to be some blend of what Bielema has done and what the previous guy who was just there did, and not in a we got to do what the previous guy did. That was Rod Smith from Arizona. He was in Rich Rod, is it? And the guy they brought in to run their offense has done a little pro style. He's done a little run game. He's done a little spread, a little quarterback run. I think you're going to see kind of a blend. It won't be that much different than what Illinois did last year, but you might see some pro sets. One of the challenges is if you don't have 2 tight ends, then there's no stupid reason to put 2 tight ends out there who can block. If you don't have a fullback, don't play a fullback. You know, you gotta recruit those players. And so that'll be one thing to watch. But I think Illinois will have a little bit of an advantage because they're probably going to have some wrinkles that they haven't shown before, whether it's a tunnel screen or it's a bubble screen or it's some combination of things that Nebraska's like, that's new. Flip side of the coin. I really like their defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters. I think he's going to be good. I think he's done good work already in his short stint as a DC. He was at Missouri, and prior to that, some other schools. He was a little bit at Colorado. Bo, he probably was runner-up for the DB job in 2014 that went to Charlton Warren. So Walters has a really good reputation. But a defense having to learn a brand new defense is hard, especially when you're having to try to shift on the fly in a first game. So Illinois knows what Nebraska's going to do, but it has to alter its defensive scheme the way he wants it. And I can almost guarantee you, Walters isn't going to change much. And they're probably not going to run a Lovie Smith cover Tampa 2. So what they're going to do is something that I think Nebraska doesn't mind going against. Nobody minded going against Lovie Smith's Tampa 2 because you know where to go against Lovie Smith's defense. It's a question of whether you can execute it and you can hold on to the ball. But I think Nebraska's offense should go in there and have a really nice day. I really believe that. I think Illinois' offense subsequently might get a few plays.
Yeah, I thought Barrett Ruud, the inside linebackers coach, made a good point this week. We were asking him about how do you prepare for something that you don't know, and his response was you have to be so comfortable in your own scheme, you know your own rules, know your own assignments, that you can adjust to whatever you see. And how many times, Sam, in the last few years did we hear Scott Frost or somebody say the opponent threw something at them that they'd never done before, that they'd never seen before?
Yeah.
It seemed like quite a bit.
Yeah.
And quite often.
And he was often talking about the defense, doing
Sure.
something to Nebraska's offense,
Sure.
to be fair.
Sure. But you saw a little bit of that both ways, but it felt like this, we talk about the value of continuity. I feel like that's where it's going to show up, is these guys, especially defensively, know what they're doing to a point that they should be able to adjust to whatever Illinois puts out there.
There's no question.
You would
there's,
think.
There's
You can't do it
enough
now.
rules in the way a defense works to hit, and there's only so many ways you can line up. If a 2x2 formation is a 2x2 formation, really, in any team. Aside, short of them coming out in the wishbone or the T,
Right.
or what Coastal Carolina does, because Coastal Carolina does something a little different, and it's hard to stop right now because people are struggling to kind of understand where they're going. Short of coming out on those offenses, I don't think that there's anything Illinois is going to throw at them that's too exotic. That said, I still think they'll probably have a few things, and I think Brandon Peters, who's probably going to be their quarterback, is a pretty good quarterback. I think he's pretty good, and he had a great game against Nebraska last year, and so I think there's reason to worry about what might happen, offense to defense. If Nebraska's offense struggles against Illinois, it just crops up all the same questions that we've had now for many years about, are you guys good at doing what you want to do? Because if this is, Illinois will be one of the 4 or 5 worst defenses they face all season long. I'm going to say Buffalo might be a better defense than Illinois. Fordham's probably going to be the worst. Then Purdue. Maybe Michigan State, although I trust Mel Tucker. And then Illinois or Buffalo. This is not good defense. So Nebraska needs to be able to go in there and kind of hit them in the gut and get downhill on them and dominate that.
It's not just are you good at what you do, it's are you good at are you improving at what you do? Are you good at teaching these guys how to do what you do? That's what they need to show above all else, progress. And if they're not showing it against Illinois, we got problems.
Yeah, agreed.
So we're not giving Nebraska's offense any grace if they struggle against Illinois, learning a new defense, because Nebraska is introducing a lot too. I mean, their wide receiver. We have no idea what the wide receivers are.
No,
going to do
I
or
think
can
it's
do. We have
probably
no
harder
idea
to
what the running backs are going to do.
I think it's harder for a first game defense. Unless you're doing something that, again, is way off the rails, and it's like you come in and we're going to blitz 7 guys every play. I think it's very hard for a defense to know all the rules that they're going to have to deal with right away. We've seen this a lot. 2015, Nebraska shifts a defense, messy. 2017, they shifted again, messy. 2018, they shifted again, messy. Like, it's not a clean picture when you change your defense. It usually takes 5, 6, 7 games in order to get the rule sets right and, like, be able to adjust to what you're seeing. Are there exceptions to the rule? There are. Bo Pelini in 2003, exception to the rule. But more often than not, it's hard to make a defense magic in the first game when you've changed everything. You didn't just change the coordinator; you changed all of it. And
So
I will see, but I think Nebraska's offense should do well in that game.
So how drastic of a shift is what Illinois is doing defensively? Would you anticipate?
There's going to be a shift because Lovie Smith does a lot of the stuff that Lovie Smith does. And if you note, like, he's so known as a commodity as a defensive coach. And again, I think Lovie Smith's a good defensive coach. He didn't have the players at Illinois, and he was disinterested in recruiting, but he's a good coach. I think there are things you do against his defense that work or don't work based on your execution.
And oh, by the
I
way,
would assume Ryan Walters will do a cover 3, some sort of combination of cover 1 and cover 3. We'll see. I mean, I don't know.
and oh, by the way, while we're talking about all these changes on defense and learning the rules, Nebraska's is also just bigger. They're bigger, stronger, more physical than Illinois is. I would say generally, not comparing every position 1-to-1, but
No, they
generally,
are.
Nebraska is bigger, has more
They're
strength and that sort of thing. So, especially when they're talking about we want to run the ball downhill, they should be able to do that.
I want to get into, I guess, sort of a thought exercise here. So we think about some of the things that have hindered Nebraska under Scott Frost, that have hindered them last year. I'm going to give you guys 4 categories, and I want you guys to tell me, and I'll weigh in too, which of these do you think are you most optimistic that will change for the better, and which are you thinking like, yeah, this is probably not going to improve that much, this will probably stay about the same. So here they are. First one, penalties. Nebraska, about 60 yards per game in penalties last year. That was 93rd nationally. Turnover margin. They were almost dead last in the country, like 3 or 4 from
Yeah, they
dead
suck.
last in the country. Minus 1.3 or
They're
so
terrible at it.
per game. Downfield passing game. They had 6.6 yards per attempt downfield. That was 93rd. We all know they just didn't have a deep threat
I was
in the
looking
passing
this up
game.
last night. Adrian Martinez would have ranked tied for 100th in 10-plus yard passes last season. He would have been tied with Toledo's Carter Bradley, who was Toledo's backup quarterback, who played 4 games last year. 39 10-plus yard pass plays out of the Nebraska offense last season. Needs to go up.
Not great, Bob. Yeah. So it's penalties, turnover margin, downfield passing, and special teams, which chronically put Nebraska at a disadvantage in field position and led to some big game breakers.
So we got to rank the ones that 1 to 4, the ones we think are most likely to change, and the ones that are least.
Yeah.
Let me go.
I mean, you were chewing on it right there. It sounds like it.
All right. The most likely to change is turnover margin. I think Nebraska is going to finally commit to a system that reduces the number of turnovers they commit. Beyond that, because they're playing Buffalo and Fordham, they're probably going to be +4 or 5 in those 2 games combined. It will give them a pad that helps them. So first, most likely to change is turnover margin. Second most likely to change, in my opinion, is special teams. I think that they've put... You can't get much worse than how bad they were. So relative change wins special teams. The third one is the downfield passing. I don't know how much better they're going to get at that. They might get a little better. I think there are things you can do to augment that, and I can talk about that in a minute after Jimmy and you give your lists. But that would be third. The fourth one is penalties, and here's why. Penalties can germinate for reasons that are not always a sin of commission. And there are really good teams that commit a lot of penalties. And let me just give you an example. If Nebraska's really good for some reason and they're kicking the crap out of Buffalo or Fordham, you're putting in a third stringer and the kid does a jackass thing. That's a penalty. It doesn't mean anything. But you could commit 4 penalties in the fourth quarter, and for us comes off, I didn't really like how we committed those penalties after we were up 41. But they don't mean anything. They're not meaningful to the win. So penalties have a weird way of, they're somewhat meaningful. They've been meaningful for Nebraska because they have no margin for error. But I'd say that would be the least likely.
All right, I'm going to. I'll move the penalties up a little bit higher. I'll take penalties as the most likely to improve because it's been.
Why?
Because it's been emphasized in practice.
Okay.
Those mistakes feel the most correctable to me. There's a lot of penalty variance, as Sam just mentioned. Sometimes it's stuff at the end of games, whether you're up by a lot or down by a lot. That stuff can matter or not matter. It's being drilled into their heads. It's something they are always thinking about. And Sam is laughing at me, but to circle back where we came from.
No, it's actually true. I mean, many of their penalties last year were false starts.
Sure.
And
to circle back where we came from,
Stuff. Yep.
to where we started the show, a lot of experience. Experienced teams tend to
Right.
know the rules better. They tend to gel together better. So, at the risk of being laughed off the set, put penalties, number 1. Number 2, I will put the special teams, again, correctable, and if you can just kick the ball through the back of the end zone, you're doing a whole lot better than you were doing last year. Number 3, I will say, I'm torn here. Number 3, I'll say the passing game. Again, I'm not particularly confident in that, but you have to pick a direction here, one way or the other. Adrian Martinez, a lot of good stuff coming out of camp about Adrian Martinez. A lot of people saying good things about Adrian Martinez. I heard Sam on the Sip and Sam showdown last week saying he likes the way Adrian's shoulders look when he answers questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, body language doctor over there, saying Adrian Martinez looks a little bit more relaxed
The
when he's
shoulders are
answering
down.
questions. That's a good indication.
It is.
But we still don't really know what's happening at receiver.
Fair enough.
That's number 3. And number 4. My goodness, I forgot what number 4 is. What is it?
Turnover margin.
Turnover margin, yeah.
What do you
Turnover
think their
margin.
turnover margin is going to be this year? It was negative 12 last year in 8 games.
Yeah.
So I'm curious
We've
as to
got-
what you think. What you
You
think it's
want
going
me
to
to
be?
pick a number?
Sure.
Okay.
A range.
Let's say I'll say it stays the same.
Well, they're in trouble.
I'll say it stays the same
They're in
because
a lot
it's
of
a really
trouble.
tough schedule. There's a lot of talented defenses on the schedule,
It's fine.
and it's most of the same parts. I mean, we're talking about Adrian Martinez here
That's
when we're
fair.
talking about turnovers. He hasn't shown us yet that he's not going to fumble the ball. He hasn't shown us yet that he's not going to throw interceptions. So let's see it.
If that happens, they're in trouble. They're not going to have a good season. They're going to have a bad season if they're negative 12 in turnover margin. Agreed?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
For sure.
So you anticipate them having a bad season. It's okay.
I'm certainly, yeah.
Okay, that's
as we've
fine.
been talking about this.
Nothing wrong with that.
As we've been talking about
It's
this
okay.
throughout the preseason, I've been a little bit
the odds are in
chillier.
your favor because
Yes.
they've had 4 in a row.
Yeah, I'm a little bit chillier on Nebraska's outlook this season
Chill out.
than
I like
you
it.
are.
Evan?
I got to go special teams, number 1. I just wrote a story about it and kind of talked to a lot of different people about it. I think going to Mike Dawson it may turn out to be a better move than we thought it would when Frost just reassigned him there. In the little snippets of practice that we saw, he's a formidable on-field presence. He's got
He
the
is.
big, the big voice, and you know where he is all the time.
I like that.
And
The world needs more of that.
you take that and you take the addition of Bill Bush, which is no small thing.
Right.
Very experienced special teams guy as an analyst behind the scenes. You take that and you compare it to what Nebraska has had, whether that was Jovan DeWitt under Frost, who was fighting cancer a lot of the time and handed a lot of that off, and through no fault of anybody's.
Yeah.
And then you see what they did in the COVID year with Jonathan Rutledge as an off-field analyst.
Kind of surprised they didn't just go ahead and pay his full salary and hire someone else in that role.
Sure. And so I think you look. Those were
That
the
was
realities
tough.
of
That
the
was
first 3 years.
Yeah,
of special
I don't
teams.
think they managed years 2 and 3 well at all. I think, and I think the head coach would probably own some of that.
And the other point I would make about special teams is I track the personnel for
You
special
do.
teams after games for us. The first year was totally different every game, and they were throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. By years 2 and 3, about half of the personnel on there was still walk-ons or former walk-ons.
Yeah.
This year, that's not going to be the case. You start looking at
Well,
some
we
of the depth.
we say that.
It appears. They have more scholarship guys. Like
Agreed.
You talk about.
They say it though. They say it. When they go out there for the kickoff, you're going to take down the list, and we'll see.
Yeah, we absolutely will.
Probably be 6 walk-ons.
But you look on like the defense, for example. We talk about how deep it is. Like
I get it.
the number 2 guys on that defense are going to be out there on special teams. Like they just are.
Okay.
I think.
And Chenander
I'm not saying saying
Chenander-
that they shouldn't be.
Chenander
I'm
made a
saying-
point this week to say that some of those backup spots might be determined by how useful you are on special teams.
Sure.
So that's also something.
So I think that goes from a liability to at the very least a push. I think they're going to get more touchbacks on kickoffs from players.
Sure.
I think Daniel Cherney, if he ends up being the punter, is going to be an upgrade. Connor Culp, you know what he can bring.
I
after
agree
what
with
he did
all
last
this.
year. I think that's.
I think they're going to be better on kickoff, whether it's walk-ons or not. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that, at Rutgers last year, they're running guys down there that aren't going to catch much.
Sure. My number 2, most likely to change, I would say, is penalties, because they showed that they could do it 2 years ago.
They did.
They were one of the least penalized teams in the country, and they kind of reverted last year in 2018. Incidentally, they were one of the most penalized teams.
Yep.
But I think they can. That's something that you can coach out of them. Goodness knows that's been an emphasis. Again, we'll see if it shows up in a game, but that's been something that's been coached into them. I think that's a thing that.
Was 2018 the year where they were dancing on the sidelines when they were down like 21, and Frost came in and he's like, "We look like we're happy to be soccer, happy to be here," or something. I can't remember what he said.
That was his least disciplined team in America line. And
They had a lot of penalties in that Purdue game.
and he was
I
right.
remember, yeah.
That was ugly.
The guys were whipping the towel.
My,
That was more of a Riley feel.
it was. Hip hip hooray. That's right.
That's right. Okay.
My number 3 would be turnover margin. I think partly because it can't get too much worse than it was. You think about all the flukish turnovers that they had last year. We've chronicled
but
how
you still ranked it 3rd.
I know. I think all of these things can change to some extent. I'm
Okay.
not sure about the 4th one so much, but the first 3 for sure.
Okay.
Just out of dumb luck, and as veteran as the defense is, I think that's part of the equation too. It's not just can Martinez and company limit the giveaways, but what can the Blackshirts do to get the takeaways? I think they can improve a little bit. So I think that's be number 3. And then downfield passing, I don't know. I'm in kind of a wait and see mode on that. They're starting totally over essentially with the receiving core.
Well, define downfield. Is it more than 20 yards?
Well, yeah. Again, they averaged about 10 yards
In the air.
in the air. Yeah, no, I
Air yards.
you think about like how many deep throws did Nebraska actually complete last year?
Very few.
Very few.
Very.
And 2 years ago was the same deal. I always think of this one broken play where Spielman was open.
Colorado.
On the Colorado game.
Yeah.
And that was like, there were just very few of those.
Yeah.
And so it appears that Nebraska has some more playmakers there. It appears the line can hold up.
Well, they didn't even have a Fifey-and ability to throw, a jump ball like a Brandon Riley. They used to have that.
Right.
And the last couple of years, Adrian hasn't even had anybody who can just go up and get the ball. Or they haven't thrown it up. Like I was thinking at some point last year, they're like, hey, let's just send Xavier Betts on a fly route.
Sure.
See if he can run past everybody, and we'll throw it to him. You know, schoolyard play.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't even do that.
Right.
I'm like, it
That-
was
they're
like
just- yeah.
4-yard curl. You know, like it was. They just, I don't know.
So it's like it's a question as to whether Nebraska has the personnel to do it for one.
Right.
But more than that, it's does the staff have the want to call those plays?
Well, they're talking a lot about run the ball downhill, run the ball downhill, run the ball downhill this preseason. Now, it's possible if you get good at that, you can run some play action stuff that will
Yes.
help you throw the ball downfield. But it sounds like that's a more it's a every now and again type thing that they're going for. Hit one or two of those big plays a game, and they're okay with it.
That's right. You know, you remember the Crouch Lord years,
Oh, yeah,
quarterbacking,
absolutely.
and how Tracy Wistrom would just be running like 30 yards in front of everybody because nobody covered him because they thought they're going to run it again. Big play passes happen oftentimes when you run the ball well.
Sure.
Jamal Lord hit Matt Harrion. Okay, Matt Harrion was a great athlete, but sometimes when Jamal Lord hit him, Harrion was wide open because you
Mhm.
know people get so sucked in by the run, and so Nebraska's downhill run game could improve. I think the downhill passing thing is part of the issue is you got to have guys who can win outside what we would call the numbers, not just the hash marks. Defenses have done a really good job of taking pretty much everything away inside the numbers if they want to. It's really hard for a safety to get outside the numbers, though, unless he's like out there already. And so you have to be able to hit that throw. Illinois did. They hit it last year, I think, 2 different times. Josh Immator Bebe caught one over Boodle, and then I believe he caught one over Newsom in the same game. And you've got to be able to hit that. You've got to be able to hit that 30 or 40-yard fade ball. When they had Stanley could hit it. You go back and watch Stanley's highlights. There's like a highlight package on YouTube. I'm going to say 20% of his catches, highlight catches, were either right on the numbers or outside of them, beating a corner. Because you have to have a receiver who can do that. And he can do it. And I don't know. We'll see if Nebraska does. I'm not trying to knock anybody when I say iffy if Levi Falk is that guy.
Sure.
Hey, let's send this guy deep and let's have... Now, Omar Manning, did you guys see the video that came out over the weekend of him beating Cam Taylor-Britt?
Mm-hmm.
Not many receivers can do what he did. He might have pushed off a little. But there's not many receivers who can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got to find a way to get that guy 2 chances per game to do just that.
Yep.
You have to find a way. You have to, again, so much of, like what I wrote on Monday, and so much of it is about you have to commit yourself to playing a certain way. You have, if you want to get better deep ball passing, you have to send your best receivers deep and throw it to them and say, I don't know if it's going to be caught. We're going to throw it so far that maybe only you can catch it, or maybe this other guy can catch it if he's, I don't know, Darrelle Revis. You got to do that stuff, though. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. It's like the thing on your errand list it's the wish list. And if you never get to it, you never get to it. And I think Nebraska struggles unless they can scheme a deep ball. In other words, we're going to send out 5, and this guy's going to do a post corner, and this guy's going to do this, and this guy's going to do a slot wheel, and somebody's going to forget to cover him. That's the kind of deep passes they like. They like the ones that they can schematically open up, and there's a bust, and there's JD for the score. Can they just send a guy deep and say, are you going to go? Can you go up and get the ball? Like Brandon Riley did.
At what point?
Nebraska would have lost by 41 points to Tennessee if they don't have that one play. What was the score? 45-28? 45-24?
Something like that,
It was
yeah.
manageable.
Yeah.
It was because of one play, because they were able to throw it up to Riley, and that opened other stuff up. But if they hadn't hit that play, oh my God, it might have been 45-3.
At what point do you feel like we will have a sense for what Nebraska, like all the stuff that you're talking about, like that they'll commit to the run, that they have an outside threat? Like, do you think we can glean that from the Illinois game? And if not, I mean, then you're talking Fordham, Buffalo, whatever the Oklahoma game becomes. Like, do you feel like this is a discussion that will continue halfway through the season? Or do you think this is something that will be evident in Champaign in a couple weeks?
I would say that Illinois is the best test that we will have early in the season, because after that it's 2 teams that they should walk over and a team that will probably walk over them. If it's not, if we don't know after Illinois, it's probably because we if we don't know after Illinois, it's probably not a good thing.
We may
because
not know until
yeah,
Michigan
We may
State.
not. We may not know until Michigan State, and if we should at least have some encouraging signs coming out of that game, because if we can't go that deep in the season without knowing what's happening with the downfield passing game.
Agreed. I agree with that.
So next week we'll get a little bit more into the schedule, a little bit more into Nebraska specific
Football,
stuff.
real football.
We'll get into picks. We'll actually have picks next week. We'll get to pick
Couple.
a game.
2 or 3.
Nebraska. We'll get to pick the Nebraska game.
Why UCLA?
Yeah. So that'll be fun next week. But this week we're going to talk a little bit more about just the Big Ten at large, conference champions, college football playoff. I guess we can start with the East. It feels like that's kind of an easy, short discussion. How do you guys see the East division of the Big Ten shaking up?
So I did a little bit of research on Ohio State. Every year, 247 does the blue chip. What is it? The blue chip ratio, the percentage of 4 and 5 star recruits that every team has on their roster.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State, 79% of Ohio State's recruits are 4 or 5 star players. The next highest number, both in the East, Michigan and Penn State, but 58 and 56% respectively. Good numbers, good numbers. Top 60. The premise of the article every year is these whatever teams can win the national championship. You have to reach a certain threshold. Michigan and Penn State made that list, but they're still lagging far behind Ohio State. So, new quarterback, I get it, but Ohio State is winning the East.
The quick answer is Ohio State. We could discuss it for a while, but at the end of the day, I think Ohio State is the team. There's things about Penn State that I like. I think it's good that they have a third-year starting quarterback. I think it's good that they've got some pieces at wide receiver that I think are really good, but I think Ohio State's the better program, and I think they're the better coaching staff. I kind of root for James Franklin. I think he's a perceptive guy, and I think he's kind of a different guy. I think he wants very much to think about things in sort of a heterodox manner, and sometimes that gets him to good places, and sometimes it doesn't. But they really struggle to win the biggest games, and he really struggles to get it done in key spots. And so I'm going to say they finished second, and then Indiana third.
Yeah, I mean Ohio State. You give them the benefit of the doubt with the quarterback uncertainty. They have so much talent everywhere else, and even if they didn't, you kind of look around the division and say, is Indiana ready to take that next step?
Their schedule's too hard.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, Michigan.
Quarterback health also a question
is
for
struggling.
Indiana.
It is.
You know,
That's right.
yeah.
You never know if he's going to make a whole season.
Penn State or Indiana probably in that runner-up spot, but yeah, Ohio State. We can keep this one a little shorter and simple.
Yeah, let's do it.
The West, a little bit more interesting.
It's one way to put it.
A little bit more interesting. I think, Iowa was the team that the media picked in the Cleveland.com preseason poll. I believe it was Iowa.
It was Wisconsin.
Was it Wisconsin?
I believe so.
Maybe it might have been Co. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah,
well,
very
those
close.
were the teams.
They're
that-
two very
they were
similar
very
teams,
close.
to be
What
fair.
did you pick?
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you when I get to it here.
Okay.
So it'd be those two teams.
You voted in it. That's why I asked.
Yeah. Minnesota would be the other team that's a popular pick. And so how do you guys see the West shaking up this year with no maybe obvious contender?
The two units that I trust the most in that division are Iowa's defense and Minnesota's offense, just because Tanner Morgan, by default, the best quarterback in the Big Ten West. I mean, he's definitely had some great moments in the league, but out of those two, taking those two premises there, I trust Iowa's offense more than I trust Minnesota's defense. Minnesota's defense is pretty rough last year. Iowa will not be a sexy team to watch every week, but they will get the job done. I like their defense. They'll grind it out. I like Iowa to win the West.
Gary Dolphin, Iowa Hawkeye football. The West is the best. Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin will have a top 5 defense in the nation. Really liked what I saw from them last year until they got hurt and sick and 12 other things. Really good defense. Big, athletic, very hard to run on, good secondary. Like the quarterback a lot. Got a touch on the football. very, very good passer. Run game's a question, but I'll take them over Iowa. I think it comes down to the Wisconsin-Iowa game. I think Nebraska could go into November with a shot, but they'd have to beat Wisconsin and Iowa, and I don't think they will beat both those teams. So, and they'd have to beat Ohio State too, and I don't think they will. Nebraska's got the hardest schedule, Big Ten wise, of those 4 teams. Minnesota has the easiest. Actually, Northwestern has the easiest, but Northwestern is not, to me, going to win the West. But I would have said that last year, and I would have said that in 2018. So, with Northwestern, you just never know. But I'll take Wisconsin.
Yeah, Northwestern is interesting because they have so little back in this year when everybody has so much back. So
They changed defensive coordinators too, didn't they?
The thing that they have
That's a big
relied
deal.
on
Yeah.
for so long, continuity and experience and letting the other team beat itself, is not a given for them this year. So
That's right.
I think that's really fascinating. I am not picking Northwestern to win the West. I'm picking Iowa to win the West. That's what I voted in the Cleveland poll. And I also agree that I think it comes down to the Iowa-Wisconsin game. And for me, it's a little stuff in that. Like, Iowa has a bye leading into that Wisconsin game. I think that's important in a game that's going to be, the color of the Big Ten logo, black and blue. I think that's going to be a bruising, tough game. Iowa often finds a way to win that game against Wisconsin. They have over the course of recent history. And while maybe the upside of Graham Mertz is higher at quarterback for Wisconsin than what Iowa has, it feels like just the way that they've developed those lines, there's a certain benefit of the doubt that I want to give Kirk Ferentz with how they develop their guys. It feels to me like Iowa is in position to win that game and win what could be a really close race in the West.
Here's the thing with Iowa, and to me it's absolutely a thing. They got to play Indiana, and they got to play Penn State. Wisconsin has to play Penn State. I think they got both playing.
They do. Yep.
And so, but part of it is Iowa's schedule early is tough. They know they're going to face a healthy Michael Penix. They don't. Outside of last year, they struggle against Penn State. So we'll see. But Iowa would be my number 2. Let's move on.
Conference winners.
Okay.
Power 5, conference champions. How do you guys see it shaking out starting the Big 12?
Big 12, I like Oklahoma. This might be the best team that Lincoln Riley has had. Defense has been much improved over the last few years. Spencer Rattler, we know what he brings to the table. Am I going across the line, or am I just going Big 12 right now? Am I doing quick hitters?
Let's all do Big 12.
Okay. I like Oklahoma. It'll be Oklahoma, Iowa State most likely. I know Iowa State brings back, I think it's 19 of 22 starters. Love Matt Campbell. Just Brock Purdy. Need a little bit more juice than that. I think Spencer Rattler has the juice. Brock Purdy may be lacking a little bit in that area.
I'm also going Oklahoma. I would love to pick Iowa State. I think that'd be really cool. It'll be fun to watch Texas and Oklahoma in road games this year, given everything that's gone on with conference realignment in the offseason. But Oklahoma's too talented. Sooners.
Iowa State would win the Big Ten West, but they will not win the Big 12. Oklahoma.
ACC.
It's Clemson, kind of the same. I mean, we've seen, if it's Clemson, Notre Dame, we know what that looks like. If it's Clemson, North Carolina, Sam Howell, nice quarterback, can't overcome the roster gap that we have between the rest of the positions out there. We know what Clemson's quarterback looks like in big spots. He looked pretty good last year when he had to be thrown into the fire. Unexpectedly, this year he's got a year to prep. I'm going Clemson.
Yep, got to go Clemson as well. New quarterback, but we saw what their backup did last year. A ton of talent everywhere else. There's some, the ACC's on the come. I think you can look at some other teams that have some pretty talented rosters too. But even without Trevor Lawrence, I just think there's too much to overcome.
Best ACC has been in many, many years. Usually it's a trash league. I think it's a lot better this year. A lot of older players. Clemson's my favorite, but I like North Carolina. I like North Carolina State, and I like BC. I mean, I like the way that Jeff Haflick coaches. I think he's going to be in the NFL either next year or the year after. And I think it's going to be a pretty good league. And, Clemson it does have the talent advantage, and that's part of the issue. The thing that may change a little bit this year is maybe they'll have 3 hard games in a row instead of 1. And if you alter that equation a little, does it alter the way that their season goes? We'll see. I do think Clemson will lose its season opener against Georgia, and I tip my hat to Clemson for playing it. I really do. That's a hard ass thing to do, to go play that game right off the bat, and they're doing it, and I appreciate that.
Well, let's go to the SEC.
This is the fun one, right? It's Alabama, Georgia. I hear all the reasons why this. If you're going to pick against Alabama, this is probably the year to do it, right? They've got 3 returning starters on offense. They changed up their offensive coordinator. Georgia's got 14 starters back. JT Daniels looked extremely good in the last 4 games of the season when he was back from his knee injury. Alabama. Just until I see otherwise. Alabama.
Yeah, I can't pick against the Tide. I know that they lost a lot, and Georgia's going to be really good. And they could be a playoff team even still. But, yeah, I can't pick against Saban and the Tide.
Alabama. I think Georgia's going to be really good and make the playoff, but I'm probably with you. Like, I think... Let me say this. Alabama does not lose that season opener, but I do not think the game against Miami will be easy. I do not. I think it's going to be hard. I think Miami's got enough players, and they've got a good enough defense that it's going to be a weird, weird game. I don't think it's going to be 38-7. And if it is, where in the hell do they get all the players? Because they lost a lot. I think that they could lose that game or win it by very little, and it will make people think a certain thing. But by the end of the year, I think Alabama will be the best team in the SEC.
If the tiebreaker is NIL money, we know where it goes. Nick Saban told us.
Well, I mean, shoot, yeah, they make their share. BYU's doing pretty good themselves.
That's true. That's true.
Go ahead.
Pac-12, round it out, if we're still calling them a Power 5 conference.
Come on, that's
Washington.
future ally.
Again, better league than I think people give it credit for this year. I've got, in my AP Top 25, I've got 4 Pac-12 teams in it. Five. I'm sorry, 5. So 5 of my 25 are Pac-12 teams. Washington is my favorite. I think, first of all, I love the way they play. I like their style of offense, kind of a pro-style offense. They have a defensive-minded head coach who I think is smart enough to know what complements his defense, which is running the football. They've got great tight ends, pretty good quarterbacks. So I think they'll win the North, and then I think the South is really close between Utah and USC, but I'll take the Trojans.
Okay.
Hold on,
So
we got
Washington will win the Pac-12, but I like a Washington USC Pac-12 title.
your 5 top 25 Pac-12 teams.
Correct.
Washington, USC, Oregon,
Utah, and UCLA.
UCLA.
And that's the one that no one else picked.
Okay.
And very few people think Utah's going to be that good, but I like Kyle Whittingham, and they have Charlie Brewer, so they're going to transfer quarterback from Baylor. That's a great boost for them, so I think they're going to be really, really good. 10-2, 9-3, somewhere.
I'm going to go Oregon for a lot of the reasons that we talked
Cool.
about, talent, and what they did last year in the league. They did shorthanded, a lot of injuries, some opt-outs, and they were still able to get it done. I think you look at just the, how recruiting rankings and talent equates to on-field success. I mean, they're the standard bearer in that league for that. And I think we're going to find out early. They're going to be tested too. They have that game at Ohio State on September 11th, week 2 essentially. So they're going to have some experience there too. I think if they can win that game, man, the momentum, or not even win, but even just be competitive in that game, I think that can go a long way into the rest of the season. So give me Oregon to pull out that title.
Oregon, Ohio State's another game where I think we could come out of it thinking one thing, and then maybe Oregon over the course of a season tells us something
That's
a little
fair.
bit different.
Yeah.
I like Oregon mainly because last year I believe they had like 4 spring practices under new offensive coordinator Joe Moorhead.
Yep.
Before COVID stuff started getting weird. They still won the Pac-12 this year. They have a full year under the new OC. Anthony Brown looked pretty good in the 2 starts that he had at the end of last year, and if they have any trouble with him, they got a 5-star behind him. Studs on the defense. Kayvon Thibodeau's going to be a
Well, they
top
have a
5
good
pick.
defense. They have good defense.
Give me Oregon.
They've recruited really well on defense. Really, really well.
And then the last one, college football playoff. Who's your field? Who is your champion?
My field is, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. And my champion is Oklahoma. And I think there's a good chance that Nebraska will play the 2 teams that play for the national title. And the reason I say that is because Alabama and Georgia wouldn't play each other in the playoff. They won't do that. They won't have a rematch of the SEC title game.
So you think Clemson will win the ACC but be left out
Correct.
of the playoff?
Because they lose to Georgia.
Okay.
Surprised?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
We'll
talking
see.
about leaving 2 Power 5 conference champions out of the playoff.
I am.
That's, yeah, okay.
So I'm trying to logistically, Georgia beats Clemson, right?
Right.
Then let's say they would lose to Alabama.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I've got the same 4. I've got Oklahoma and Alabama in the national title game, and tied to repeat. That's so boring, but history says probably right.
I like watching them.
Me too.
I don't like watching Clemson, but I do like watching Alabama.
Hmm.
I root for Clemson to lose. Often. Almost always.
I have 3 of the same. Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma. I think Clemson does get in over Georgia. Just because, again, I think Georgia has more landmines to sidestep the rest of the year, even
I
if
agree.
they win that game.
For sure.
So that'd be my 4, and I think Oklahoma too. If for no other reason than you look down the line, and you see a lot of unproven quarterbacks outside of Spencer Rattler and what he can do, I think there's just something to be said for that guy, knowing who that guy is going into the year, and building that momentum.
But if you
as we
get to the
go.
playoff, we're going to know about those guys by then, for sure. But
Mhm.
for sure, you're right about that. Spencer Rattler is the most proven of this group, I think.
Yeah.
I will say this, that Cincinnati isn't probably going to do it, but they have the schedule where if they win all their games, they'll make the playoff. They'll make it. And they will do it because they have Indiana and Notre Dame. And if they win those games and then they win all the other games in the AC, they will go
Mm.
as a 4 or whatever. The playoff structure is pretty messed up. And not because it's 4 teams, but because at the end of the day, who you have making the decision as to the 4 teams that make the playoff are human beings who are imperfect and flawed and hopelessly biased toward Alabama and Clemson. And I'm not saying that the bias is wrong. I'm saying that regardless of what they see or they read or the numbers, whatever they say, they're going to be like, yeah, well, if you put Alabama in the playoff, they'll win. You can't alter a human. You just can't do it. And so I feel like the system has been tilted toward those 2 teams for a long time, and it would take Alabama losing at least 2 games or 3 to be eliminated because the presumption is, well, they're Alabama.
What's funny about that is people that are advocates for expanding the playoff would do that to hope that they would shake up, eventual title winners, when really all that does is guarantee all the more that Alabama's going to be in there every year.
It does guarantee it. I think one of the things that you might get if you get to 12 is they would be like, yeah, we're going to put Alabama 6th. We're going to put them.
Yeah. As long as they're in.
If they want to win their way out of it, they can. But we're no longer going to feel this compulsion. The 2017 thing was. I keep going back to that. That was an embarrassment. That was Alabama did not belong in the tournament. They didn't belong in that. UCF and Ohio State both had much harder schedules. UCF didn't, but UCF didn't lose. Ohio State had a much harder schedule, won its league, and didn't get in because it's Alabama. It's okay. It's Alabama. They didn't even win their division. That would never have happened 20 years ago in college football. They would have lost. It would have been heartbreaking. It would have been tragic. And that would have been the end. They would have went to the Sugar Bowl and finished 12-1 and carried whoever the coach was at the time, Ray Perkins, off the field. But they would not have played for the national championship. And that irks me. It's irksome.
You look irked.
I am.
I think that's more what people, when we're talking about expanding the playoff, it's more about giving these teams a shake. Give Cincinnati a shake. Give them a ticket to the dance.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll get escorted out of the dance very quickly, but let them in. That's what it's about.
Yep.
That's fun.
I agree. Trev say anything today, Jimmy, that was worth noting?
Oh man, he did mention the. I was talking. Who did you guys? Oh, the Pac-12. We were talking about someone here kind of just foo-fooed. I think it was Evan foo-fooed the
me.
Pac-12. Future ally, man.
Yeah.
Trev alluded to the. He didn't. I wouldn't say he confirmed the Big Ten ACC Pac-12 alliance, but he alluded to it. He talked about being on conference calls about it, and he said that there are multiple timelines that exist for the implementation of that. He talked about wanting a seat at the table. People, you want college football is about to change in a big way, right? Everyone wants to say in how it's going to change.
Right.
I thought that was very interesting. COVID protocols. We have a better picture of what they're going to look like. The Big Ten is not going to issue any of its own. It's going to be an aggregation. Basically, the Big Ten sent out questionnaires to all the Big Ten schools. Big Ten schools filled them out, and the guidelines that the Big Ten hand down will be an aggregation of those protocols.
Okay.
NIL stuff. Nebraska has joined programs like Ohio State in giving out group licensing deals for the kids. He mentioned, college football video game. Nebraska could be a part of that if that's something that ends up happening. He's still kind of sifting through which kids he wants to allow to use the Nebraska brand. It's kind of a case-by-case basis based on, if you're going to partner with Joe's Tobacco Shop, maybe not. If you're going to partner with Pizza Shop X, I don't know any pizza shops yet still, but if you're going to partner with Pizza Shop X,
I'm not sure there's a Shoppy in Lincoln.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there is.
I don't
There
think
you go.
so.
Well, there's another thing they got back on the East Coast. That's my.
Yeah, that's the.
Ye
I don't
old
know.
shoppy.
That's one of the worst accents of all time. My
That's-
wife always tells me I have the worst.
That's the Trev report.
Cool.
More to come. About to go write that up as
That's
soon as
good.
we break here.
That's good. Incidentally, the scheduling thing, if you tell me you're going to go back to 8 Big Ten games and you're going to have 2 games at least per year against one ACC and one Pac-12 team, I'm in. I'm jumping in head first. Love it. Give it. Now, Nebraska won't be as high on that pecking order as Nebraska fans think they will be. So you won't get Clemson,
Probably a good thing. Probably a good thing.
right? You won't get the heavyweight battle right off the bat. But you will get, it would be very cool to see Nebraska have an opportunity to play Utah. That'd be awesome.
That'd be cool.
To see Nebraska play Utah and then to have, Nebraska also play a game in the ACC against, Georgia Tech or Wake Forest.
Game at North
again.
Carolina. That'd be cool.
North Carolina,
Oh, that'd
yeah.
be really
When
cool.
we were talking about playoff earlier, playoff scenarios. Just more information. We get a better. We're not just
Right.
comparing resumes and schedules anymore. We have data. We have on-field data about what the Big Ten looks like on the field against
Right.
the ACC and Pac-12. That'd be very helpful.
It would be. That's a hell of a good point because there isn't a lot of data on that stuff right now.
No.
That's a really good point.
We have bowl games where everyone claims they didn't
and
care
they're
if they don't win.
They're
Right.
meaningless, right?
Right.
Because they're at the end of the year, but that stuff sticks in people's brains.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can't tell me inside that room somebody doesn't bring up a completely meaningless data point as a rationale.
Let me ask you this: if
liking a
Iowa
team.
State didn't beat Oregon last year in their bowl game, would they have this? Would they have nearly the amount of hype that they were 9-3 during the regular season last year? Would
Yeah,
they have
they were.
nearly the amount of hype that they do? Like people are talking about them as a fringe playoff contender.
No,
So
Not as much. Yeah.
nope. I don't think they would. I think they're a good team.
Sure.
I think I have them 7 or 8. Very, very wonderful, great team. Better team than Nebraska's had certainly in the last decade. I don't know that I'm putting them in the echelon with Alabama.
Cyhawk game will be fun this year, though.
And it's different because the Oklahoma game is like, well, you play them every year. You think about a one-off. Well, if you send Iowa State tomorrow to Clemson, how do you think that's going to go? Not that well.
Sure. Anything else?
Anything else?
Huh?
No, I don't
Huh?
think so.
Bueller?
Next week's game week, and it's been a really long summer. We hope everybody reads our special section, which I think is going to be a lot of fun,
Yeah, it's cool.
and a lot of great art from Matt Haney, and so I hope everybody reads it and enjoys it. I'm ready for this season. Man, am I ready.
You've been ready for a couple weeks now.
Yeah, I've been ready for a long time because I think this is a season that everybody can look forward to, and it's really interesting, and there's a really interesting game off the top. I'd be less excited if it were Fordham because there's really not much you can extract from that as a season opener.
Right.
But you give me Illinois, and if Nebraska can win it, they are going to be so thankful they played it, because that is at least a reasonable test compared to Oklahoma versus Fordham and Buffalo, which will not be. So, and of course the Oklahoma game. Are you looking forward to that game, or are you almost completely like, I can't wait for it to be over, so we don't have to write about it and talk about it, and we already know Nebraska will lose, kind of thing.
The lead up will be cool. The lead up will be cool, especially if Nebraska's 3-0. Some of the old war stories that will get
Sure.
torn up, or that will get dug up in the lead up to that game. The ambiance around the stadium will be super cool. The on-field, the 3 hours of the game's happening, probably not gonna be super fun. But everything else, it's atmosphere. That's half what college football is about, right?
I think if you play Oklahoma, if you play it the way that Kansas State and Iowa State do, you can hang with them, and then you need a couple of breaks, which both teams got last year. But are you looking forward to that game, or is it more of a,
Well,
I know this game's going to happen, and it's a really big deal, but one of the teams probably is going to win, and all the rest?
The thing that I'll say about the Oklahoma game is that, when you follow the team as closely as we do, there are all these other interesting points. Like the Illinois game, to me, is really interesting. There are a lot of Big Ten games that are really fascinating, but I think in the bigger scope of things, from a national perspective, from the perspective of even a casual Nebraska fan, that Oklahoma game is a big deal. I mean, people casually looking at college football schedules each week, Nebraska, Illinois doesn't move the needle. Nebraska, Northwestern doesn't really move the needle. Nebraska, Oklahoma moves the needle.
It does.
And so, regardless of whether Nebraska gets blown out or it's close or whatever, that day will be really interesting and important because it will be the measuring stick that most people outside of the Nebraska fan base view this team. And I think that'll linger as the season goes on. So from that perspective, I think it is really fascinating because, again, that's how a lot of people are going to evaluate that program outside of this area.
Yeah, can Nebraska Oklahoma not look like Nebraska Fordham? That's the question there. And
Yeah.
That's what people will be evaluating.
Like I
when
wouldn't put it in
watching
my
that game.
top. I wouldn't put it in my top 3 or 4 most interesting games of the year. I think there are a lot of other really fascinating games, and for a lot of different reasons. But again, from a national perspective, I think that's what people will look at.
Yes.
is that.
I think they will too.
So, all right. Well, we're gonna get out of here on that. Next week we'll have more of a team breakdown, more of a schedule. We'll have a game, an actual opponent to discuss, and then we're gonna be trekking out to Champaign, Illinois, home of press box custard, foliage.
Custard, yeah.
It's
pretty
all
good,
that
right?
Oh yeah.
Then they got the little pictures of all the coaches in the little vestibule there. Not a vestibule, a hallway, or whatever you want to call it. They got Lou Tepper and what was the one of, the idiot coach they had 5-6 years ago. What was his name?
Tressman? No.
Mark Tressman?
No.
He coached
No,
for
no,
the
no,
Bears.
no, no, no,
Same
no.
colors.
Thank you. No, I don't remember. We'll go out on a
This
high
has
note
been your
on
press
that.
box minute.
Yeah. We'll go out on a high note on that.
He was the guy, Tim Beckman.
Beckman, that's what I'm thinking. Yes.
My team's motto is Oski. Remember when he went to Big Ten Media Days and he was screaming? All right.
The podcast is over now.
Thanks.